Hello and welcome to Founded, a Pleasant Phantom production, where we find the stories you missed in history class. I'm Tori Phantom, and joining me to hear about Samuel Adams and the Sugar Act is my best friend and best listener, who sometimes passes a pop quiz, Gwenna Lathland.
Hi.
Hi.
I sometimes pass a pop quiz. Listen. Listen, I need you to know that when you first started giving me pop quizzes, I didn't like them because they were pop quizzes. And now the gifted and talented little girl that lives in my head really likes them and hopes that we get to have more quizzes, especially since I only log about half of what you say to me per episode.
To be fair, I only log about half of what I say too. I talk too much.
So the quizzes are very nice because it reminds me where we are.
You're going to start listening to the podcast you co-host just so you can study.
So I can remember what we talked about. Okay.
Yeah. So this episode, as you know, we are talking about the Sugar Act.
The Sugar Act. We finally got to the Sugar Act.
We finally got here. Now let's see how many episodes it takes to leave it. So...
It took us 6 to get there. How many episodes is the Sugar Act, Tori?
We'll find out together. It's funny, though, because you might have noticed here that I said Samuel Adams and the Sugar Act, okay?
Yes.
Now, I need you to know this. You know how I've told you I play this game when I'm reading my biographies and my history books where I go, how long until Benjamin Rush shows up?
Yes.
There is a similar game that I play with Samuel Adams if I am reading a biography of a Bostonian.
Okay.
It will actually somehow also be about Samuel Adams, maybe more about Samuel Adams, because he was the puppeteer. He was pulling all the strings.
So apparently it's the Sam Adams effect. That's what I am labeling that.
Yes. Yes, literally. It is the same thing because
Samuel Adams knew literally everyone in Boston.
Well, he made it his business to know everybody, which we will get into. Samuel Adams is the puppeteer of Boston in the 1760s.
Just randomly knows everyone for no good reason.
Oh, actually, he had good reason.
It's several good reasons.
Yeah, I don't think the people he knew understood that he had a reason. But this man was literally going to clubs he didn't belong to. He was going to schmooze with the rich folks. He was going to the taverns of the poor folks. He knew everybody and he would recruit them. So he is an interesting fellow. So before we get into today's episode, I do have a pop quiz for you. Are you ready?
Yes.
Okay. To start off, I'm going to make it easy for you. What was the official name of the Sugar Act?
Okay, listen, this is the weirdest way to have remembered it, but it's the ADA, which is not the Americans with Disabilities Act. It's the American Duties Act. That's how it logged in my head, Tori. Don't judge me. I don't
think that's a weird way. I think that's actually, that's a clever way to remember things. I like it. Okay, next question.
Yes.
George Grenville, who was the prime minister in Britain.
Thank you for telling me that.
Yes.
I didn't remember who George Grenville was.
Yes, he became the prime minister in 1763. He's the one who came up with the American Duties Act. Well, he got into an argument with King George III and made him promise not to talk to someone in a very second grade way. Who was that someone that Georgie had to promise to never talk to?
Lord Butte.
Yeah, I am so proud of you. Okay. I'm going to give you another
sticker after this episode. Yay.
I'm going to give you another easy one before I give you the challenging questions. Okay. The colonists didn't care much about the Sugar Act until a certain someone stepped in and roused the rabbles.
It was Samuel Adams.
It was Samuel Adams. That's right.
Don't call him Sam. He doesn't like that.
He didn't like that now. Okay. Are you ready?
Yes.
What was the Declaration of Expectations?
This is a wild guess. That was the thing that we sent to the British to tell them that we didn't like the first ADA.
Kind of, actually. I never actually got to this in the last episode.
Listen, that was
it was a horribly trick question there, because I mentioned it in our last episode and I never got to it, but we will be getting to it today, which is why it's in the quiz.
Okay.
And our last question
That
here.
was cheating.
It's not cheating. It was just a trick question. What patriot was surprisingly apathetic about tax acts and supportive of the British expanding upon them?
Okay, so Benjamin Rush ran his mouth enough that it wasn't him. Samuel didn't like that. So I'm going to take a wild guess based off what we have already discussed on Founded and what I carry into this discussion already knowing. I am so confident this is wrong, but there's like a little tiny part of me that kind of wants it to be true. So I'm going to say George Washington.
Yeah, you're wrong. I will give you the answer at the end of the episode.
Just immediate. No, sit down. All right, I'm sorry.
But you got most of the questions right. You just didn't get the trick
You
questions
can't make
right.
it better. You cannot make it better. Here's how fear of failure works. It's done. You ruined it. It's not fun anymore. Tell me about the Sugar Act and Samuel Adams. Go.
So the Sugar Act. Most historians trace the first beginnings of parliamentary resistance that eventually led to the revolution back to the Sugar Act, as it was the first deliberately organized protest throughout the colonies.
Okay, so to provide context for this, the shot heard round the world was the start of the Revolutionary War, the war for the American independence.
Yes, the War of American Independence.
But the revolution itself began when George Grenville and Georgie Boy decided to re-up the Molasses Act by creating the American Duties Act, which was the Sugar Act.
Yes.
So they basically went and looked at an old act and went, we should actually do something about this. They made the American Duties Act, which did a whole bunch of things that were supposed to be good, but still to the colonists represented paying taxes to the people that because of salutary neglect,
I'm so
they promised the colonists not to tax them, but they viewed the Sugar Act as a tax, even though they tried to make it sound really, they tried to gaslight the colonists. No, this is good for you.
They lowered the duty to try to get them to stop smuggling. Right. I am so proud of you, because when we started this podcast, you did not see the difference between the revolution and the war.
No.
You've come so far. You just passed a pop quiz that I didn't even give you. 10 out of 10. Yeah.
Look, I like words, and salutary is fun.
It is fun. It is. So you are correct. This is really, now we've talked about before how there were a lot of kind of bad feelings before this. But this was kind of the moment that
there was the thing where the officers were treated differently, and the militia, and there was a massive
whole land bank.
There was a massive class difference.
Yes. But this is the moment
Feels
where
familiar.
Kind of everybody. We have the merchant elite in Boston who are also yelling no taxation.
So wait, change
without
doesn't happen till the rich
representation.
people get mad?
Yep. Big surprise. Now, it is important to note, okay, why would the Sugar Act of all things be what sets them off, right? Because they have been paying duties. They have been in ways paying taxes and dealing with all of the trade regulations and really monopolization of the trade with the colonies. But the Sugar Act itself is what set people off. And of course, part of that was Samuel Adams. But England and New England's economy relied on sugar and slavery in the 18th century. So Boston relied heavily on trade with the Caribbean, right? And so Boston and New England, they do have quite the story with turning to abolishing slavery and ending the slave trade. And even in 1764, James Otis Jr., who we've talked about, he said,
He's the one who actually came up with the no taxation without representation phrase.
He is credited with popularizing it, at least.
Fair enough.
Yeah. He, while arguing against the Sugar Act, said, the colonists are by the law of nature freeborn, as indeed all men are, white or black. And he continued to say that slavery threatens one day to reduce both Europe and America to the ignorance and barbarity of the darkest ages, and referred to it as the most shocking violation of the law and nature. So there were progressives.
There were people who saw the problem and knew that a solution was required, but then there were other guys who were muddying up what those solutions should actually look like.
Yes, and it was never the priority that it should have been, and that is going to be a theme that we see come up a lot later on, and we will get to that. It's not something I want to glaze over, but I brought this up because some of the arguments, too many of the arguments against the Sugar Act, sounded something like, don't these taxes reduce us from the character of free subjects to the miserable state of tributary slaves? Yeah.
That's gross. Like they understood that the conditions that slaves were forced to endure and experience were awful. They did not want to be like slaves because they recognized how crappy a life
horrible
that was.
A situation that was. Yes.
And yet it would take them another several
100 years. Decades
or so
actually do something
about it. The Civil War.
Yeah. And
anyway.
that quote that I just paraphrased came from our guy Samuel Adams, because I feel like I do sound like I celebrate him a lot, but he had some big misses too,
flaws.
Right?
They all had flaws.
Exactly. But my point is that saying something and doing something are different, because as we know, Samuel Adams was gifted an enslaved woman, which is a gross statement. And he immediately emancipated her.
Yeah.
And then he employed her rightfully for decades, right? But also then he says this. And so saying something and doing something are different. And it is just absolutely wild to me that the men arguing for liberty were yelling about being reduced to slaves while living in an economy that depended on slave labor, whether they were slave holders or not. Don't love it. We're going to dive a lot deeper into all of that. But right now we are talking about the Sugar Act.
The Sugar Act.
Yes. And so we've talked about how the rabbles were being roused in Boston by Samuel Adams. Who really enjoyed organizing anger. Yeah. He had found himself to seemingly be the only one mad about the Sugar Act when they first heard the rumors of it coming, because no one was talking about it.
Because they'd already sort of like played this game with the Molasses Act. You have to pay taxes on the molasses, and the molasses were important because of the rum. And so the colonists just be like, oh, we have to pay taxes. Huh? We have to pay duties, huh? Right. Hey, bud, you just want to go steal it? Let's go steal it.
Right. And now, of course, the customs officers were granted a lot more power. And now they also, they had a benefit, because if they confiscated any of the smuggled goods, they would now get a cut of that, which was going to be worth more than what they were getting paid off for. So no one was talking about
the monarchy really went, oh, they're smuggling and they're just paying off the dock officials. We'll just pay them more with the smuggling.
Literally. Yeah. And so nobody was talking about this Sugar Act at the town meeting or at the tavern or at the political clubs. And no instructions had been sent to the agent representing the colonies in London from the Assembly or the House. And Samuel Adams took that personally. So
why aren't you mad about this?
Yes, that's the whole energy. Okay, so he starts telling his closest friends and co-conspirators that they could not allow these taxes because it would just lead to more taxes, and their independent governing days would be over. So he himself started bringing it up at the political clubs, in the taverns, at the town meetings, and many thought that,
because again, Samuel Adams is subject to the Sam Adams effect.
Yeah,
knows everyone.
Yeah, and many thought that it would be useless to resist a huge government, especially one so far away, but that did not slow him down.
Keep in mind, also, some of these messages are taking months to pass back and forth. The fastest ships at the time still took a couple months in ideal conditions to get from what we call the UK to the colonies at the time. And that was assuming someone had the money to just send one of the quick zippy ships. Because if the ship also had rum or sugar or people on it, it took a lot longer because it couldn't go as fast.
Yeah, and we're talking, it could take weeks, it could take months. Oftentimes, people would want to get on a boat, and the boat's not leaving for 2 months because of the conditions, because it's wintertime, because of this. And so this is happening during the wintertime, and we are picking up here in the spring. And so it was taking a while for stuff to get around.
Yeah.
And so Samuel Adams wanted to make people mad. Well, he didn't want to make them mad. He wanted them to join him in his anger.
In being mad.
Yes. And
he wasn't making his mad, other people's problems. Anyway, on this episode of Childproof.
Well, he kind of was making it everyone's problem, actually.
He was just showing them why it was already their problem and that they should, in fact, be mad about it.
That's where he started. He really enjoyed violence, but we're not there yet. So the one thing that Samuel needed to do was to unite the colonies, right? Which
I'll tell you what, my understanding of founding fathers is just upside down anymore. He really enjoyed violence. That guy
it was
with the beer. It's not his beer.
It's not his beer. He was kind of tasked with trying to figure out how to unite the colonies. Now, this had been attempted once before the 7 Years' War broke out, the French and Indian War to Americans. And that was at the Albany Congress, and it didn't work out. The Albany plan with Ben Franklin and Thomas Hutchinson, it didn't work out. The colonies didn't unite, but he was like, we can't really change the minds of this giant government if we are not acting like we are united colonies and not independent states.
Yeah.
So he didn't know how to reach all of the colonies, but he did know how to reach his representatives. And that could get them to bring the issues to the assembly, the Massachusetts Assembly, where Boston held the most power in Massachusetts Bay Colony because they were the biggest city. So if he could win over the politicians and get his ideas brought to the House and approved, he could make change. So what's he do? He gets louder.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
now,
what it does.
Massachusetts, their town meetings, they were the way that local townsfolk could have their opinions heard. And so this was a regular occurrence. The town meetings were a very important thing. And so he goes to the town meeting, and Samuel gives impassioned speeches against the taxes. And he said that Grenville's acts were not like the taxes from Massachusetts because they, the people, voted for their representatives in that governing body, and that they must resist to preserve their autonomy. And he actually was able to make many realize that although they were British subjects, they also had to protect themselves from the government. And he created a bridge between the ability to self-tax and freedom. So now we have conflated these two ideas. If we are not self-taxing, we are not free. If we're not
the ones in charge of agreeing what the tax rate is, agreeing what is taxable, and how we collect those and how we distribute those. Because I think that's another part of the equation that's being left out, is it's not just that money is being taken from us. It's that we as colonists have no say and likely have very little benefit from how they spend our tax money because it is literally being shipped across an ocean. And some of those monies may have gone to fund troops to protect all of this new land that they got after the French and Indian War. But for the most part, they had no say in how to spend that. Is that part of what made them so trepidatious?
Well, and especially because this peacetime army that they are now being tasked with funding, they didn't get a say in that. And it also undermined the militias that had been protecting themselves, right? Because again, with the salutary neglect, they were taking care of themselves. And also King George III, he had a wickedly large budget for personal use. And that was never called into question.
Yeah.
The amount of peacetime army they were keeping in the colonies was never thought to be reduced. They were just having these taxes and what their money should go to and how much imposed upon them for the first time in a century and a half.
Yeah. Now, keep in mind the idea of the colonies in imperialistic thought. Now, I'm going to frame it that way, in imperialistic thought. The idea of the colonies, the reason they didn't have to pay taxes to the British government, they just had to maintain their own settlements. So they self-taxed. The reason they got away with that is because what they were producing with a whole bunch of slave labor was being shipped on behalf of Britain. So if they made tons and tons of textile. Those were Britain's textiles. Those were not the colonies.
Yeah.
Britain was selling those textiles to France and Austria and Russia. They were making all that money.
Yeah.
That's what the colonies were for. The colonies were production level areas. And yes, the colonies would also have to farm to feed themselves. They would also have to collect taxes. So they had roads to move all of these goods and equipment and people around to make all these textiles and wheat and wine and rum that the British would then profit from.
Yes.
This was step 3, right before profit for Britain.
Right, well, and that's literally some of the colonist arguments were that, is this not us already paying taxes because of the amount we are contributing to the empire via trade and the exports we're doing? Like, we are providing so much money. Why do you want more? And they are in a post-war economy. They don't have any money.
Yeah,
their economy
King Georgie
is ruined.
still has an unquestioned budget to do with whatever.
Exactly. The only thing they were questioning was his relationship with Lord Bute. So,
Lord Butt.
So this is all happening, right? This town meeting is happening during the election season, actually. Samuel Adams was not up for election. He was not a member of the government. And yet he was appointed to prepare the instructions for the city's representatives to protest the act at the General Assembly during this meeting, where they also voted for the delegates to strictly follow whatever instructions he came up with.
Hey, Samuel Adams, you're so good at being mad. Could you show us how to, like, officially be mad?
Right. It is important to know that the Massachusetts House held delegates from all over the colony, and that the House met in Boston. So Samuel Adams' ideas would become more widespread if presented to the entire House.
Yeah.
So he capitalizes on this, of course.
Yeah.
His instructions he wrote were basically an opinion piece. That was also a set of mandates.
An op-ed?
He did. He kind of created an op-ed opinion piece, because what he did with these instructions is not only did he give instructions on how to resist, he included why you should resist. He was putting his opinions into this, and he was able to reframe the entire issue from his opinion of it. And so,
I personally don't like this. All the rest of you should hate it too. Here's why.
Yeah, the first thing he does is he gives this negative commentary on the slow response from the General Assembly and how the London agent who was representing Massachusetts Bay had asked for a statement but received little input. Now, remember, Samuel was the only one so infuriated by the act to start with. So, of course, they're not getting instructions because no one else cares. Well, no one else cared, because now they do, right?
I care.
Then he went on to give his actual instructions that representatives should demand the duties repealed. And he framed this argument to be in the financial self-interest of the British, and if they didn't repeal the act, it would be detrimental. And he did so by saying that trade helped both American and British economies expand, that trade was what made the colonies beneficial to the crown, and that the taxes would slow the growth or stop it altogether.
Right. If you're taxing people, they can't buy the clothes and the food that they need to just continue surviving. And if you kill off your working population.
Yeah. Exactly. He pointed out that Americans spent millions on British goods, and they got most of their imports and the items that were unattainable in the colonies from the mother country, because manufacturing itself, you're thinking like clothing, shoes, that kind of thing.
That was all done at the home.
Yeah, that was not a large industry at the time, right? So a lot of that they had to get from Britain until homespun became a thing, which was kind of prompted by Samuel Adams later on. And homespun, let me just define that really quick, was the act of making their own clothes and becoming self-sufficient on a more personal community level. And he said that the amount that they were spending and the amount that they were exporting to Britain, that should outweigh any revenue collecting tax of the government. And he was writing this over a decade before Adam Smith published the The Wealth of Nations, which I read in the book Samuel Adams, Father of the American Revolution by Mark Poles. So when I read that, I had to go and look up what this book was. And it turns out that is the foundation for modern economy. Like that guy, he's responsible for capitalism. Oh. But
okay.
Adam Smith with The Wealth of Nations, that is very similar to what Samuel was laying out here in his instructions. Yeah. So apparently he was also a big capitalist. Anyway, after spending quite some time in ink writing about how the representatives should resist, he then started writing towards the average reader. Now, Massachusetts had higher literacy rates than all the other colonies at this time, and they had mandated public schools. And the schools were determined by the population. So if you had a smaller population, you had a specific size school that you would need. And the bigger the population, the bigger the school, the bigger the expectations. But they had mandated public schools. Like that was required, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it was inspired during this Enlightenment period, which I will do an entire episode about later on. And a lot of it was in their Puritan values. And this was a thing that I was really surprised to read across all of the biographies I've read, no matter whether it be in New England or the South or the mid-Atlantic colonies. So many really, really, really championed education. It was so important, to the point they were even arguing to educate women. And that was a big shift.
As you're talking about the Age of Enlightenment, in this podcast, we spend a ton of time like trash talking Britain, especially in the reign of King George III. But keep in mind that while it is fraught with errors and has in many ways hurt a lot, the idea that people should be able to access bigger ideas. King James made his Bible because he felt it was inappropriate that the scripture, which was an important part of their belief system and their governance, he felt that it was incorrect that the scripture was not accessible to the regular population, because prior to the King James versions, almost all the Bibles were still written in Latin. So not only did you have to know how to read, you had to know how to read Latin to be able to read the scripture. And King James, several generations before King George III, was like, nah, that's inappropriate. We need to focus on education and literacy and being able to read the scripture. And so the King James version of the Bible was born. There were some other political things that were happening in there. And the King James version is, well, it's problematic to be very, very vague about it. But that was part of the motivation. The Brits, and by extension, their colonies, through the Age of the Enlightenment, were really big on, no, we should teach people to think for themselves.
I love when you teach me something on my history podcast. I didn't know that. Thank you. Yeah.
That's why the King James version of the Bible exists, because King James, the successor of Queen Elizabeth I, thought that the normal people should be able to read the scripture.
Huh. The more you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So education has been important to the British citizens for a long time, whether they were in a colony or not.
Huh. Well, that's neat. Well, we're going to dig into that on another episode of Founded, apparently. So Samuel is now writing to the average person, much in this vein. And
because they can read.
Yes. And he is inspired by John Locke, as many of our founders were. And he connected independence and freedom to the tax burden. And he said, for if our trade may be taxed, why not our lands? Why not the produce of our lands and everything we possess or make use of? And he went on to explain how this took away their right to govern and tax themselves and forced them to relinquish their rights as British subjects. And it's so important to remember this, that until that shot heard round the world rung out, they were happily British subjects, like many of them were. This is so complicated in the way they went from, we want to have a good relationship with the mother country, to we are our own country.
Right. And even when we get deeper into the story and we're talking about the betrayals and the loyalists, a lot of times, because history is often written by the victors, history is often described by the victors, and the victors continue their ideas of, this is why we were victorious. A lot of times we're going to end up running our mouths a little bit about some of the loyalists, like, oh, how dare they? But they were all coming from this same thing where some of them were like, no, if we lived in Britain, we would be subject to property tax. We would be subject to goods tax. We would be subject to all of these things. And I hear what you're saying, Samuel. I know you're mad about it, but I don't feel like it's that big a problem. So as we progress, we will run our mouths about the loyalists. Okay.
Yeah.
We will. But keep in mind, at no point do we want to forget that all of these people who were super confused about what to do about all of these new things that were happening, they weren't necessarily wrong. They just had a different opinion.
And they didn't know what was going to happen next. We know everything that happened. They were living
all
in the
big
current
question
time.
Marks.
And they only had so much access to information happening everywhere,
and
right?
Again,
like the
biggest navy, biggest army, biggest monarchy. And even needing the money so bad they had to tax their colonists. So much money in the British Empire.
Yeah, that's the thing too.
How do you stand up to that?
Yeah. And while the colonists are out here yelling about the tax burden and this and that, many of them didn't even realize that the situation in the motherland was far worse. Yeah. It was a far worse situation. It was very bad.
It took months for communication to pass. That included newspapers.
Yes. And so he went on in his instructions to hint at this idea that if the government was going to violate their rights, they could retaliate by creating non-importation agreements. And he knew that non-importation agreements could never work without other colonies joining in and having widespread support. Now, you might know of non-importation agreements as a boycott, but that wasn't a word until the year of 1880, when Irish tenants used the act against Charles C. Boycott, who was an old-timey realty guy, to try to lower rent prices. So Samuel Adams invented the boycott.
Before boycotting?
He invented the boycott. It was such
didn't get its name for another 120 years.
Yes. Because that's why it was called a non-importation agreement, because he wanted everyone to agree to not import British goods or to buy them, right? And so this was his grand idea that literally didn't even have a proper name yet because it was so new.
They're making things up as they go.
Yes. And I also want to point out here, because I think it's funny, that Samuel was also excited about these instructions that he has been appointed to write, and it has been
as a non-elected official,
and it has been voted on that the elected officials must follow these instructions, because his nemesis, Thomas Hutchinson, who was an elected official, was going to have to follow his instructions. Okay. Now,
nanny boo boo.
Yeah, that's the energy. And so
there was like 90% of Samuel Adams is like, listen, it's actually a really huge problem, and we're going to stop being colonies, and it's going to get weird and worse for all of us. Yeah. And if we don't fix this, but also I can stick it to Tommy.
Yes, because Thomas Hutchinson was a part of the land bank
going
debacle.
After his daddy. Yeah.
Yes. And so here's the thing, though, is that Samuel Adams was a huge radical, and he knew he was a radical, and he knew not all of his ideas would sit. And so he was very careful, which is
he was
why
one of those guys is like, how am I going to die? Definitely by a firing squad, probably for sedition or something like that.
Literally, yeah. But he was careful about it. That's why he didn't outright say we should.
Did he die by a firing squad?
He did not. He actually lived to be like 82 years old.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Did he die in the founding father hamster way?
No, he actually just died of old age.
Yeah.
Non-hamster
Angry
here.
man.
Angry hamster. He was the hamster that would bite you.
Just for no good reason.
Yeah, exactly. So he was very careful with the way that he presented these instructions, because he knew if he was too radical, they would be rejected, which is why he hinted at the non-importation agreements. It was kind of one of those things like, I want to make it your idea. If it's your idea, you'll like it. I'm just going to kind of plant the seed here.
Samuel Adams is our chief gaslighting founding father.
You have no idea. Propaganda was this man's forte, okay?
Gaslighting into people, hey, the sugar thing's a problem.
He literally...
I didn't say that. You said that.
He is known, okay? He is known for being one of the first Harvard graduates to do nothing with his life. Like he was so bad, right? Like he just spent
Did you have a degree from Harvard?
Yeah, he spent decades failing in business adventures and racking up wild amounts of debt because he was a tax collector who didn't collect the taxes. Okay.
That's right.
Yeah, we'll get more into that when we start talking about John Hancock. But he knew that the colonies were reliant on the crown and that nearly every British subject wanted to remain loyal. So he was speaking to their feelings of liberty and independence. He was organizing anger by using empathy. They all knew how the dynamics played out between the colonies and the country, and many felt some degree of unheard, misunderstood, or ignored by the crown, and that's what he counted on. Unity is something they could agree on in some way, shape, or form because they all knew what it was like. They had a unity in being colonists to the mother country.
Okay. So it was an important part of the identity. It would be almost the same energy as someone who is proud to be a New Yorker.
Yes.
Someone who is proud to be from Jersey. You are a member of the United States. You are a citizen of the United States. But more than that, you are a New Yorker.
Right.
You are an Oklahoman. You're from Colorado. That's your home.
And that is, I think, anybody who has moved and started living in another state. I live in Kentucky now, but I still claim that I am a New Yorker because that is part of my identity.
Well, and I, having been born and raised in Oklahoma, I don't have a strong sense of state identity, but I wonder if I were to leave it the way the colonists looked at everything that was Britain and sailed across an ocean to an unknown land to start over, did that sort of heighten the, oh, I'm British. I am carrying my Britishness out unto the world, not in a derogatory way, not in a disrespectful way, but like I am proud to be doing this in the same way that maybe someone who is a New Yorker moves to Kentucky and be like, no, I'm a New Yorker. That's the culture that feels home to me.
Right. Because they considered themselves proud British subjects.
Yeah. When we get into the part where they become loyalists, remember that.
Yeah. But the instructions that Samuel Adams wrote, well, it was basically the first public document to call for colonial union and joint protest and to question parliamentary power. Quote, that by the united applications of all who are aggrieved, all may happily obtain redress. So then, at the next town meeting, right? So we had started kind of in the beginning of May. Now we're at the end of May.
Yeah.
He asked that his instructions be approved by the residents, and they approved them. And his words were then published in the Boston Gazette and then reprinted elsewhere. He went colonial viral. He went colonial viral. Yeah, he did.
Thousands of likes.
Yeah, basically. Now, Boston did write 1/5 of all colonial newspapers. They did.
That helps.
It does help. And he was also known to write articles and like send them to New York for publishing so that it seemed more like it wasn't him. Because again, like we hear in Hamilton, why do you write like you're running out of time? That was also Samuel. That was 100% Samuel, except he was really big on propaganda, though I guess Hamilton was too.
I was going to say,
but these instructions.
The Jeffersonian propaganda, the Franklin propaganda.
All of them. But these instructions are also the Declaration of Expectations. It's the same thing. It's the Declaration of Expectations.
I was mostly right.
Yeah. Yeah,
and it's basically the first letter. They said that, we are colonists, not citizens. Stop it.
Yeah, and so after this, James Otis Jr., who was a big co-conspirator and bestie of Samuel Adams and kind of his mentor in politics because they were similar ages, but James Otis Jr. was a lawyer who was in politics for much longer, whereas Samuel Adams kind of had this comeuppance.
Why does James Otis sound hot? Is James Otis hot?
No.
Oh.
He wasn't hot. Sorry. But he went on to publish a pamphlet of his own called The Rights of British Colonists Asserted and Proved, where he agreed that the king and parliament have all...
The titles always crack me up. Here's everything that I'm going to say and exactly why I am right.
Yes. Yeah. So in this pamphlet, he agreed that the king and parliament have all the power, and Britain is the most free country, and British
With the exception
subjects,
of all those slaves.
right, and British subjects have the most liberty. However, quote, no parts of His Majesty's dominions can be taxed without their consent. And he included Samuel Adams' instructions in his pamphlet. And then Otis went on to win the re-election as a delegate to the Massachusetts legislature, where he brought Adams' instructions and ideas about a colonial Congress and colonial unity. But then the turns are tabling here.
Okay.
Francis Bernard, who was the royal governor at the time.
Mm-hmm. So directly reported to the king as a governor.
Yep. He shut it down. The entire
The
house.
rebels were way too roused.
Yes. He saw that the instructions were going in front of the house. He saw what they said, and he had the power to shut up shop.
So wait. So there was a really important document that could have made a whole bunch of problems for the reigning government. And an important leader came in and said, no, we can't talk about it because then people might find out what's inside that important document. Go home.
Yep.
He did.
Uh-huh. And so this was in June. He shuts the entire government down, and
He made Congress go home. Okay.
Yep. And he left it shut down until October. Because
Maybe I'll forget about it by then.
no, he knew that if he didn't open the government back up until October, there would be no time for Congress to convene before the end of the year, which is why we don't have a riot in this story yet. He shut it down, right?
No.
And-
Oh, you guys are saying the scary words all in the scary order. Stop it. 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 Stop it.
Well, here's where it gets funnier, okay?
It gets funny.
It gets funnier because here's the thing. The crown, the British government, parliament, they literally, like, violent protests were an expectation. And so if people were violently protesting, they would be like, oh, maybe we should change things up. And if people weren't violently protesting, they would be like, okay, I guess we made an okay decision here. And because there were no violent riots, because
Boston didn't riot. They dropped the ball and they made it worse.
but because they didn't riot, because Francis Bernard shut the government down, which meant that these instructions wouldn't become as widely spread in the government, right? It was not going to be adopted as a policy. The crown saw that as an all clear to start taxing them harder. Okay.
They're not loudly complaining. We'll do it more.
No one has been put in the stocks. They haven't burned the governor's house down. Things are probably fine over there. Okay.
They haven't lit any straw men on fire after suspending them from a noose. Oh, well, they're cool with it then.
There's no
Up them
effigy.
tax rates. They seem to be fine.
Yeah, there's no effigy this week. Things are probably cool. However, as you remember from a few minutes ago,
That's the disaster marker is, oh, they're throwing vegetables. That's not so bad. They're lighting things on fire. What things are they lighting on fire?
we're going
We're
to
an effigy. Oh, it's bad. Oh, they're mad. They're mad now.
we're gonna have to create a riot scale for how bad it was, because everything you're mentioning, yeah, those all happened at different points. You can really, there is a scale here somewhere. But
It's like the Fujita scale for Boston riots in the American Revolution.
But you'll remember from a few minutes ago that Samuel Adams' instructions were published in the paper.
In the Gazette.
And a couple other papers, and then they were kind of picked up by other colonies. And so basically, Samuel Adams' instructions became a popular manifesto on colonial rights throughout all of the colonies. And 8 colonies signed petitions about the Sugar Act causing economic injury and sent them to Britain, which was ignored.
Yeah.
And
Mood felt.
however, because of these instructions, Samuel Adams actually inspired many to try their hand at government, like Patrick Henry, who went on the next year to join the House of Burgesses in Virginia. And he also had huge influence in radicalizing others, like James Warren of Boston, who we will get to because he is an important figure I don't think you've heard of.
The founding fathers were radicals and rebels.
Yes,
They broke all the laws.
they did. They
founding
did.
fathers that we worship as the founders of our nation.
Yeah.
The radicals.
Yeah.
The rebels.
Yeah. And
Just, it's not news. Just feel like saying it out loud in a dramatic, whispery voice is important.
it's important to do that sometimes. But here's one of my favorite things, too, about Samuel Adams is that around this time, he adopted the ideology that he carried with him in all the decisions you will hear him making. And that is that one needed to put and keep the enemy in the wrong. And he ran with that. We have to put them and keep them in the wrong. So
basically, we have to spin the narrative so that whatever they did, they were wrong. That was the wrong choice.
yeah, it was propaganda.
Even if they did the good thing, it was the wrong choice.
Yes, he literally, his ideology, put and keep the enemy in the wrong, was, I'm so good at propaganda.
Yeah.
That's what that was. But we'll get to that later on as we make our way towards the Stamp Act, which the colonists were
So
hearing.
gonna take another 6 episodes to get to?
It might. Which the colonists were hearing rumors about during the time of the sugar acting up period of their lives. And that, I promise you, the Stamp Act, we are going to have a lot of riots.
Yay!
Oh,
we definitely have to make the riot button before we get to the Stamp Act.
Absolutely.
So you have that many episodes to make the riot button.
We are going to have effigy burning. We are going to have tearing houses down. We are going to have ship sinking. Okay, things are going to get out of control. But now that we have made it to the end of our episode, I have the answer to the beginning question I asked you. Do you even
which
remember?
founding father was strangely apathetic to the whole situation? And if you say Samuel Adams, I will come through the screen.
It is not Samuel Adams.
Thank you.
We
spent an entire episode discussing how angry that little man was.
Yeah. So, in a meeting with George Grenville in 1765, Benjamin Franklin dismissed the reaction to the Sugar Act and consented to a more extensive tax plan.
Was Franklin living in
Yes,
Britain at the time?
He was living in Britain at the time. Now, Samuel
Was he already radicalized or was he still pretty loyalist at this point?
He was kind of apathetic loyalist, if that makes sense. Like he kind of he didn't care either way. Yeah.
This could go bad for you, and if it goes bad, I am gonna do a told you so dance, but it might be okay.
But
we'll see.
As we know, Benjamin Franklin does make his way back around and then has a whole falling out with his son over it, right? But Samuel does get revenge for Benjamin Franklin's consenting to more taxes. Though I don't even know if Samuel knew about this meeting between Benjamin Franklin and George Grenville. But eventually, you will hear about the Hutchinson letter affair. So that's something to look forward to.
It's probably not as racy as I think it is.
It causes a riot, so...
They were just so excited to riot.
They had nothing better to do, so...
They had nothing better to do.
Anyway.
Well, they had boycotts that weren't called boycotts. What else?
Yeah. They're going to start a
Can't
riot.
import anything. We don't have any work. Might as well go throw vegetables at the courthouse.
Anyway, thank you for listening to Founded. I hope you found something interesting. Drop an email at foundedhistory@gmail.com and let me know what you want to find out next. And now that we are deep in the weeds with the Sugar Act, we'll find out what I'm going to talk about next time. I'm thinking John Hancock, but we'll see. Anyway, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a rating. We will see you next time. Well, you'll see us.